Most of all, I'm pleased that this is a small room. I hate those big rooms, and it has windows, although it's, late, but still, I hate to lecture in rooms without windows and with floral carpets, things like that. The title of this lecture is wrong, because I cannot do all of these things possibly, right? I mean, I can try, but it will be like, how much time do I have actually?
As long as you like. Yeah.
Okay, well, there you have it, It's, he's been flippant last 2 days. I spent last week, and he's getting ever more flippant. When they originally asked me, so I said, okay, maybe, I said, narrow or wide. They said broad. So I said, okay, so energy, food, environment, but okay, try my best. But I will try to do my best as far as something fundamental is concerned. I think this is a great opportunity. This is an educated audience, a knowledgeable audience. So I'll try to take it one notch up, right? Getting some numbers into it and getting some quantitative feelings into it. Such is the state of the world that we assume now that not to know any numbers and not to reel off lots of numbers is quite fine, right? Qualitative approach is all right in emotional terms. Qualitative approach is not enough to understand how things work, how machines turn, and how nature ticks. You need numbers. You need lots of numbers, and you don't need, at the same time, numbers as such. You need the right orders of magnitude to begin with. And this is what I find annoying, frustrating, that people do not have the grasp of the right orders of magnitude. It gets complicated by the fact that in what I'll be talking about, that is about energy and how to go from one energy state to another, the numbers which scientists agreed on, not here, but in old-fashioned Europe where it all started, to operate with, these numbers are very small unit numbers. Hence, we need many multipliers of these numbers. And we solve it by putting beautiful prefixes for things going up and other set of prefixes for things going down. In energy studies, you rarely need, unless you do, the radio transmissions, you don't have to go down that much, or unless you do the nanoscale technology. But if you go always up, you need these things. I've learned hard way that I cannot assume that even the most learned audience, even then composed of engineers, knows their multiples, right? First, they go by 1, 1, 1, and then they go by 3, 3, 3, right? Okay? So just by 3 kilo, right? Mega, giga, tera, peta, exa, right? And there are 2 more. A few years ago, we added 2 more. Okay? I leave it up to you to find what the 2 more are. One is big Y and one is big Z. Big Z is 10 to 24. So how much energy we consume? Well, this continent, although we've been officially metric since the time Her Majesty came to be metric, 1976. But hey, it's the pounds of salmon, and it's the degrees of Fahrenheit, and it's the miles on my car and whatever. So, a generation plus later, we still are medieval. These are medieval measures, inches, feet, elbows, right? It's just miles. How the hell can anybody remember how many feet into a mile, right? I mean, why would you even try, right? Maybe, but this is crazy. One of the greatest murderers in human history, man rivaled only by Hitler, Stalin, and Mao, put the order into these things, right? The great Napoleon Bonaparte, right? A man of vision, right? This is usually men of vision do that, kill a few million people and build new empires. But he also introduced metric system, right? So we Europeans, we've been living with this for a couple of centuries. So we are sort of used to it, really, right? What is more convenient than adding zeros and subtracting zeros? Nothing could be more convenient, really, right? So then comes the middle of the century, and the modern science is born. People like Joule and Helmholtz and Kelvin and whatever. And so in their memory, we name these units. So like it or not, the basic unit of energy is not British thermal unit, but it's Joule, right? And Joule is ever so very small, right? So for example, you take a kilo of coal, bad example. Most people in the Western world haven't seen coal at all, right? Okay, so I would say you take a kilo of oil, bad example, because oil is a liquid and you measure it in volume measures, okay, in liters or gallons or barrels, not in kilos. Besides, most of you have never seen oil in their life, right? I could say gasoline. Most of you have never seen gasoline as well, because you just pump it in and you don't even, what color is gasoline? What color is gasoline?
Bluish purple.
Bluish purple is gasoline, right? It may be or it may not be, not necessary. Gasoline may be any color you choose because gasoline contains so many additives, about as many additives as American ice cream, okay? Read the label on American ice cream, right? Number one ingredient in American ice cream besides sugar is what? If you eat a real ice cream, like if you eat a real yogurt, it's what? Drippy, right? It just drips off your spoon, really, right? By the American ice cream, American yogurt, you can spoon it and hold that spoon for next 2 weeks and it will not drip, really, right? Because it contains what? Tremendous amount of gelatin, and because of the ice cream, for what we call in food science mouthfeel, when you eat lots of cellulose. They just take these old BC trees, cut them up in little pieces and put them into ice cream. You put it in your mouth, oh, your mouth is full. Great feeling, right? Okay. So the same is gasoline. Gasoline, we don't take, gasoline is a mixture of dozens of different hydrocarbons with lots of additives, so it would do this, wouldn't do that, would poison that, would poison, so almost any crude oil same. Some crude oils are really black. Some crude oils are really rusty. Some crude oils are almost greenish. Is a green. Okay. Anyway, 1 kilo of this stuff. Okay, let's talk about carbon then. Let's reduce all these things about carbon because all these things we burn them. Why do we burn coal? Why do we burn crude oil? Right? We burn them because they contain quite a bit of carbon. Right? The thing which comes closest to the perfection is anthracite, the best, most processed coal. Everything has been driven out of it. There's nothing, there's almost no sulfur, no nitrogen, it's just pure carbon, really. Kilo of it, kilo is something you would take and like that, it'll be about a kilo of it, right? And that's only 30 megajoules, 30 to 10 to 6, right? And oil, kilo of it would be 42 megajoules, the same order. It's the same order of magnitude. And wood would be 15 megajoules. It's the same order of magnitude. It's just few tenths of megajoules, really, right? Okay, so I have 10 to 6. So 1 ton would be 10 to 9 of that stuff, really, right? And the whole world needs now about 400 exajoules. So that's 10 to 20. So I have to travel from a 1 ton, 10 to 9 to 10 to 20. As a result, I need what? Billions of tons of that stuff. So this is the first lesson to understand when we talk about energy transitions. I go from this state to that state. That state, and as you know, this is one of the greenest places on the planet. I just learned another $70 million going up for the green sustainability, and everything is green in this place, right? I read even that there's a sign there, this is where sustainability starts, which is some claim for this whole planet, right? So you know what is that state? You know it all. Wind turbines everywhere, thin photovoltaic cells, it's just beautiful. Everything is green. So that's where we are going. From where we are going is burning that ugly, dirty, poisonous coal, terrible oil, just these criminal fossil fuels, right? 10 to 20 of them in J's, right? So we need to get 10 to 20 or something like that. Suppose you see, here it doesn't matter if you use it more efficiently, because can we improve the efficiency by order of magnitude? Because most of the stuff which we convert already, we convert pretty well. I start with the tops. I have in my basement a machine which is totally, absolutely flabbergasting machine. It's called natural gas furnace. It's 97% efficient. As a result, you would go past my house and you would in vain search for a chimney. I don't have a chimney. You people who have normal gas furnaces, who live in technical Middle Ages, you have what we call the mid-efficiency furnace, which is not 50%, but which is only about 70%, right? Mine is almost 50% more than that, or 35% more, 97. So I have a little hole on the side of my house, 2 of them, and one sucks in air, there is oxygen, and one spits out a little bit of carbon dioxide, right? And at the bottom, I have a little hose, which goes to the outlet at the bottom and spits out a little bit of H2O. That's it, right? I don't need a chimney to carry all that waste heat because there ain't no waste heat, just 3% of it, really, right? Okay. So if I have already 97% efficient machine, it's very difficult to make it twice as efficient, really, right? I could make it much more efficient, different ways, but let's not go there, Let's not go. I would have to start with first and second law of thermodynamics, but it's tricky. Even your car, which is very lousy, right? If you have a good car, smart car, There is only one smart car on this planet, as I always say, and that's Honda Civic, right? Rest of it is crap. If you drive something, you'll just abandon it and rush to the dealership and buy Honda Civic because it just drives, just goes. It doesn't need any oil, it just goes forever. And it's 48 miles per gallon, okay? 48 miles per gallon, while your typical SUV is 50 miles per gallon, right? This is 3 times more, right? 3 times more. Right? While the safety rating of that car is equal to Mercedes 350. Because it's not the size of the car which makes a safe car, it's what? It's the steel box around the driver, right? When it crashes, it doesn't crush you because you are protected by the steel box, right? So it's a smart design, okay? Cars are terribly inefficient. Cars are a rare example of something which we could double the efficiency if we could pipe mind to it. Actually, we could triple the efficiency, but that's rare. Where do we get this light from? Okay, either you burn coal, half of the US electricity comes from coal, not quite, but close to it. Here it's hydroelectricity. What is the efficiency of machines which make that, right? Turbo generator, hydro generator, or steam turbo generator, they are about as efficient as they can get. You cannot get more efficiency out of them. These machines are about 98% efficient, really. Now, if you burn fuel, boiler is not 98% efficient, but maybe 95. But once you start multiplying, that's the trouble of multiplying numbers smaller than 0. One of the mysteries which impresses children in kindergarten, if they are acute. 0.9, that's a high efficiency. Multiply by 0.9, oh, bingo, I'm 0.81 already, right? Multiply by 0.9, right? You see that? Before too long, you are wasting 30% of energy. And this is precisely what happens in power plants, right? Because first I have to have a boiler, I lose 10% or 5%, right? Then I have a steam turbo generator, I lose 5% or 8%, right? Then I have to have a transmission, right? I lose 5%, whatever. And by the time it gets to, I'm losing quite a bit. Also, I am very efficient in every step, really, right? So that's the problem of multi-step conversion. So anyway, let's go back to this, from this state to that state. So we are told that there is this nirvana state where the world will be green and will live within its budget. Sun will shine, wind will blow, water will flow, and we'll be living happily ever after. While here we are burning this poisonous stuff. Okay. This new green building, which I was passing this morning, this new sustainability center, how it's built? It contains concrete, glass, steel, and aluminum, okay? Let's start with the most fundamental thing. If I ask you the question, if you yank one substance, actually it's one element from the civilization, which element you would yank out to have all of it collapse, most of all? That is, which is the element on which the civilization rests to the highest degree? And I don't mean oxygen, that's obvious. I mean the one which we use to make the civilization. Which one is the element? You yank it out, and the whole edifice of civilization collapses. As opposed to other elements, you can yank them out, and you either wouldn't notice at all, or you can easily find substitute and replace them. Which is the one you yank out and everything goes down? Harry knows. Harry knows. I know, so say it. Sorry?
I'm not going to say it. Somebody else has to guess. Right?
Well, but nobody will say it unless you say it. Guess. Guess. You can be only wrong or right.
Iron?
Hallelujah. Of course. Why? Not iron per se, because that's kind of too old and not good enough, right? Because, it's the old tensile strength and whatever, right? Iron is very good in compression, not very good in tension. We need lots of stuff good in tension. So we make steel out of iron.
Say element.
Okay? So we make steel out of iron, right? How do we make steel out of iron? Get rid of that extra carbon, right? Because iron as we make it is an alloy. It's a naturally produced, by the process of smelting. How many steels we have? You don't want to know. About 2,000 plus and still counting, right? They steal for everything. Steal for that part of the ship and steal for that part of the plane. Still, steel is even the most important part of the plane. The new Boeing, the Dreamliner 787, will be mostly composite, right? But the heart of the body, on which the wings hangs and fuselage in the middle, that's all steel strut, right? Then you see these wings doing this, right? Like that, and that's nice. They are designed to do that, So next time you see that, you feel safe. That's quite nice, really. Because there is that high tensile steel there, and that's fine, right? So it's iron. How do we make iron? I've developed several sets of these examples, but the iron one is the most persuasive because, look, it's like this. Everything you see in this civilization, is either made of iron or made with tools made of iron. Okay? No exceptions, right? No exceptions, right? You want to make plastics, aluminum, glass, food, sandwiches, everything is steel. Everything is steel, right? How do we make, okay, we said we make steel from iron, and we can make steel from steel. If you have lots of old steel, you can just simply put it in electric arc furnace and, remelt it, and that's what we do. But ain't enough of that stuff. We have to make iron from the ground up, which means we have to take iron ore, we have to take the fluxing thing, which is limestone, and we have to take the energy stuff there. And that happens to be pure carbon, or as nearly pure carbon as we get, which is coke, right? And not the one which people snort through their noses, but the one which we derive from high-quality coal by driving all volatiles out of it and left basically with Hawaii volcano-like element, right, which is very porous and which is basically pure carbon, right? We put it into a thing called blast furnace and fire it up like in Middle Ages, the actual medieval origin, and thereafter what we call the campaign, the iron pours out and makes us happy. Okay? How much of that stuff we make like this today? 1 billion tons. 1 billion tons. China alone makes 500 million tons of that stuff this way, really, right? How do you make it with wind? How do you make this with wind? How do you make this solar energy? How do you shine your sun on your blast furnace and get hot iron flowing out of it? You don't. We don't know how to make iron, what we call the pig iron or cast iron traditionally, at a scale of 1 billion tons without using coke, which is a coal product. We just don't have any alternative. Not an alternative which would be expensive and could make 10%. We have no alternative. Okay? So unless you supply this planet with endless supply of old steel, which could be remelted again and again, you got to mine billion tons of ore and billion tons or more than 500 million tons of coal to make coke, and you got to smelt iron. As simple as that. Okay? Now, for many things, once you get a super cheap electricity, suppose you get this, popular mechanics, you buy a photovoltaic cell, which is totally like my shirt, right? I dress totally in photovoltaic stuff and will walk around and, and I'll be generating electricity, right? Okay? And then I plug myself in at the end of the day and, put into some storage and whatever, right? Or I get the wind turbines. And I don't care, I'll get into it in a while. I don't care what is the load factor on these wind turbines. They may work only 5% of the time, right? But as long as they work and I have some suitable storage, I can store that electricity, right? And then I can use it. So once I get a super cheap electricity from wind or solar, I don't care how long it works or how much it works and, even how efficient it is. If it's just simply relatively cheap, that's it, I'll store it. And then I could do with it whatever. I can cook with it, surely, right? I cook with it all the time, right? I can heat houses with it, so I will not need natural furnace to heat my house. I will not need natural gas to cook my meal, right? I can drive every car on the planet with it, right? I can make a plugging station every whatever X kilometers. So there are many things which we can perfectly do totally with electricity. We don't need any fuels for it, right? How did I get here? Not with electricity, right? I flew. Is there any way how we can fly with electricity? In your dreams, right? Which is the fastest way how to travel from A to B over long distances? Fly. For that, you need something called gas turbine. Right? It's airborne variety, which is the most amazing machine ever invented by man. Why? Because it's most reliable. Have you noticed when you get there, your big Boeing, they empty it, and they fill it as far as they can, and goes back. And if you will go there again, you will notice that they'll do the same thing. 2 hours on the ground goes back. And you will be counting and it goes back almost forever. And eventually you think it cannot go on anymore. They take it out for a day and check it. And they put it back again and goes again and again, right? 10,000 hours, 15,000 hours, 20,000 hours flying like that, carrying you across the Pacific or Atlantic. Amazing machine. But it needs what? It needs kerosene, right? Or what we call jet fuel, right? Can you go out there and can you kind of, plant a tree and just harvest the leaves and kind of squeeze them and get the kerosene out of it? Oh, yes, all our bioenergy friends are telling us we'll be growing the crops using kerosene. Not in my lifetime, not in your lifetime, right? Especially given the volume. We go into volumes here, we go into scale. Remember, we have to replace 10 to 20 joules of that stuff, okay? More and more of that stuff is becoming the moving stuff, not the stationary stuff, because stationary stuff is getting much more efficient. Think of my house, 97%. You people in BC, you should be proud. You are the only people in Canada who, as I learned day before yesterday, have a code. I was lecturing to NSERC people here on Tuesday. You have the building code of 2x6. Hallelujah, unbelievable. The rest of the country is still 2x4. This is the single most effective way how to save energy on this planet. In North America where we have wooden construction. Because believe it or not, this increases the insulation of your walls by 50%. Imagine that, 50%, just by 2x6. Does it cost you 50% more for that lumber? Of course it doesn't. It costs you about 5% more for that lumber. It's almost nothing, really, right? Okay? So you people, you be proud, okay? You are the vanguard of humanity, that humanity which builds out of 2x6. Mind you, Europeans come here and look at these buildings and say, what the hell is that? Wooden sticks with something in between. That's not a house, right? I remember that years ago. That's a long story. I will not tell you how I met them, but I knew the Swedish ambassador to Canada. He said, "Next time you'll come to Ottawa, visit us." So I did. The first thing the lady of the house said when she was coming in the door, saying, "This is the real house. This is not like these sticks in Canada," right? Because it was one of these old-fashioned Ottawa mansions built of full brick, actually brick on that side, not on this side, right? So for extra insulation. So this is a real house, right? Europeans come and say, what the hell is that, You knock on that drywall, right? And it's held like 3 houses down, really, no insulating value. Anyway, you have 2x6, right? But of course, the Europeans are wrong. Because if I have 2x6, which I do in my house, because I have the most super insulated house in North America, right? Built 20 years ago, but I had 2x6 20 years ago. And I have what is called HRV. How many of you know what is HRV? Hands up. You see these mysteries of universe? Okay? I call it simply air-to-air heat exchanger. That's what it is. Heat recovery ventilator. My house is so super tight insulated that what would happen that after about 2 days, carbon dioxide from our breathing would rise to about 1200 ppm, and we would start having a headache, right? So what I have to have is constantly pumping the air in and out. But that would be stupid to pumping the air in when it's minus 25, right? So I'm exchanging that cold air coming in with that warm, stale air coming out. And up to 27, that's why I mentioned when I say up to 27 degrees Celsius, that machine is about 75-80% efficient. So I'm losing at that point, right? At about zero, it's almost like 90% or 95%. So I'm always losing a little bit, really, right? But even at minus 27, I'm losing only about 25% or so. So I do switch it when it hits about minus 30. Right? But up to that point, that machine runs all day. As I'm standing here, the machine is running at home. All day, all night, all the time. Right? So my house, after 20 years, it doesn't have any smell. Every house has a characteristic smell without HRV, right? My house doesn't have any smell because I rigged it up in such a way. I had the old machine starting in 1990. But since then I bought a new superior machine. I calculated the whole air in my house exchanges every 50 minutes. Total volume of the air, totally fresh air, right? So it cannot have any possible smell, right? Even when I cook these Indian curries, so you come back, 2 exchanges later, 100 minutes later, and it's all gone there, right? So some of these things we've really mastered. Look, the general story is this. Whatever we make in North America, this may be wasteful continent which just doesn't give a damn about, conserving energy, but not so people who make stuff. You look at the American and Canadian steel makers. It doesn't matter if it's in California, where actually most of the best steel making is done now, or in Hamilton. You look at people who make plastics. You look at people who, whatever is left here of furniture making, whatever manufacturing activity you have, chemicals on a large scale, polyethylene, you name it, we make it as efficiently or more efficient than anybody else in the whole world. Because when you make it in large scale and need lots of electricity, crude oil, natural gas, you count your pennies and you are efficient. Where we are inefficient is in our homes and in our transportation. And this is where the problem is. So if I want to go from this to that state, to begin with, I have to make everything as efficient as possible. Because it will be a very difficult task, even when everything will be very efficient. You will see in a while why. Right? I cannot make industries much more efficient. They already are as good as they are. There is always a margin, but very small margin. Houses, the huge opportunity. Imagine after the quote-unquote first oil crisis in 73, if we would have said everybody has 2x6. Every house built since 73, the houses will be here for next 50, 60, 70, 80 years, right? Saving all that energy, right? I skipped, sorry, I have to go there back. That the Europeans are wrong with that thing that even 2x4, but especially 2x6, when you put that pink fiberglass there, it has much more insulating value than the brick even on that side, right? Forget a brick like that, right? So they are wrong. These houses look tacky. These houses are wooden matchsticks houses, right? But they are better insulated than that European traditional brick house, right? In houses, we have a long way to go. You replace every furnace in Canada with efficiency. There are some old ones. Fortunately, you see, you cannot have a terribly enough. You cannot have a 40% furnace because they last about 15 years. You know, after 15 years they die, right? So you cannot have 40% efficient furnace since 1960s. It's just it's deadly, right? But imagine you would have replaced every one. These high efficiency furnaces have been available since mid 1980s, right? Imagine we would have everywhere this 2x6 code, and so on, right? But that's a long way to go, because what is the rate of housing replacement per year? 2%, 3%, depends on the areas. And it's a few percent. So it takes you a very long time to make it very efficient. Right? So in case you would get, let's say, it would be a dirigist government, and you would say, okay, we have to get rid of fossil fuels, and we have to have wind or solar, but it's not so cheap yet, but to save the planet, you have to buy it at a higher price. Well, we would be cooked in our houses because they are so inefficient. We'll be paying through our nose today, right? So this is why I stress it's most important to make everything as efficient as possible. But then you come to transport, and this is a real difficulty. And people think about transport in a very kind of naive way, because people think that food comes from Safeway, right? And whatever, PJs or shirts come from Walmart, right? No, they come from China, right? And half of the food which you eat comes from somewhere else, even in places like Canada, right? How did that food and how do these shares got into these Safeways and Walmarts? How did they get there? One answer. If you want to know more, I wrote a whole book about it last year. Diesel engines. Everything on this planet hangs on diesel. You yank out steel from this civilization, just collapses, right? No mining of coal, no cars, no nice knives made in Korea, by the way. Nobody makes any knives anymore in North America. You yank out diesel engines, and what would happen to this civilization? If you yank out diesel engines, we have now everywhere in the Western world, we have now great Japanese invention called JIT, just-in-time delivery, right? Nobody has any stocks to reduce your financial exposure, right? So that TEU, that 20-unit container, not 20, just a standard kind of measure, they are much bigger, most of them are, comes with the ship, they offload it with that crane in Vancouver, they put it on that CN rail or on that truck, and they ship it, So basically, we would run out of everything in whatever, 6 weeks to 6 months. What everything? 99.9% even of your garlic now comes from China, okay? It used to come from Gilroy County, just south of San Francisco. They used to elect every year a garlic queen and make a garlic ice cream, right? Now, it all comes from China. 100% of the dried garlic, which gives this awful taste to all these foods made in these fast food joints, the dry garlic. 100% of it comes from China. But the fresh one, 99.9% comes from China, right? You have to go to a special store to get either a local garlic in summer or to get garlic from Gilroy. In our city of 700,000, there is one store which sells Gilroy garlic for the price, 4 times the price of the Chinese garlic, right? And so we go down the list. These things, nothing is made in North America anymore. The shoes I wear, right? Even the top-rated shoes, right? They used to come from places like Italy, right? Spain, right? Not anymore. Everything is from Guangdong and Zhejiang, right? So without diesel engine, we are toast, right? And of course, you go to Walmart, and you know what involves Walmart. 95% of stuff in Walmart is made in China, right? Toothpicks in Canada are made in China, okay? Toothpicks are made in China, in Canada. What else to say? So how do you replace, by the way, Maersk, which is the biggest company owning these biggest container ships, just announced a few months ago that they are upping the proverbial ante. 18,000 container ship. One ship will carry 18,000 of these massive containers, which are like this room size now. That's what these big ones are, right? 40 feet container. 18,000. First it was when it started in mid 56, 57, 58, they carried like, dozen containers, then 100, then 1,000, then 5. Then people thought, well, it will stabilize, this madness will stabilize at 14. Then came the crisis, 2008, 2009. They said, surely that's it. Well, they shook it off very rapidly and they announced now 18,000, right? These have the biggest engine on the planet. The piston of that machine is almost like this hall. Not quite, but, not far from it. The piston of it, right? Just boom, boom. And it's a two-cycle. It just goes like boom, boom. It's just absolutely unbelievable. These are the only good thing about them, these are the most efficient internal combustion engine on the planet. They are 52% efficient if everything ticks. But they are just monsters. How do you run this ship on wind-created electricity? The whole world, what's the big slogan of the planet for the past 20 years? Globalization, down to the garlic and toothpicks from China, right? How do you run it on photovoltaics, Or in popular mechanics, they offload that kite, and that kite will be pulling that ship, really. Oh, yes, okay? Like 0.2% of the traction power there, really, right? These babies need lots of power. The ones which fly and the ones which float, we are talking about what? We are talking about megawatts and megawatts and megawatts steady delivery. And even that's not quite it, because they need for certain things more. Notice, when the fully loaded 747 is taking off, it's 410 tons. You've got need lots of thrust to take that baby off the ground. It has 200 tons of fuel. Half of that machine when it's taking off is fuel. And it's the most concentrated fuel on the planet. It has 42 gigajoules per ton. How the hell can you run it on wind power, right? Or on electricity, right? The batteries you would tow 10 as a Boeing behind that full of batteries really, to deliver that electricity, right? Because, believe it or not, our progress in batteries has been lousy. Probably the most inventive mind of the last 150 years. It can be disputed, but nevertheless, by sheer numbers of filed patent and successful patent, he was Thomas Alva Edison. After he invented everything under the sun, from the very system which we have, the system which we enjoy, take coal, burn it, rotate something, generate electricity, transform it, send it along, what we call the Edison electric system, hasn't changed at all since 1880s. Other people contributed. Ferranti, Parsons, okay? It's not only Edison, but this is what we have is 1880 stuff, really. So after he was done with all of that, he invented all sorts of other things, right? Better telephones, phonographs, 2,700 patents, basically one every afternoon for the rest of his life, right? So he said, now I will crack the real problem. I will design a superior battery. He spent 10 years on his life. He bankrupted himself on that, right? He designed a better battery, just this much better. That's all, right? We are here 100, and that was at the beginning of the 20th century, right? He spent 8, 9, almost 10 years of his life, 1901 to 1909 on the battery. He had another things too. He said, the way we build houses, this is such a stupid thing. Why don't we prefabricate them from concrete and just simply put them on spot, right? That bankrupted it once again, because you see, to this very, we don't have any, ready-made, concrete houses just dump on the spot, really. So as brilliant he was, he fell twice. Once with concrete prefabricated houses, right? And mainly above all with batteries. Now we have all of these people running around and talking to reporters from Nature and Science and popular mechanics, how they invented the battery of batteries, right? They haven't. We've got better with batteries going down. And that's not so surprising. How many of you know the name of Richard Feynman? Yeah, okay. One of the most brilliant physicists of the 20th century. Feynman so famously said, there is tremendous amount of room down there. And there is. Because down there you can carry it all the way as we did now, what? To atomic level, right? We are now depositing layers when we are making chips which are 2 atoms thick. Okay? So you can, there's lots of play space there. Going up, it's a different story. Okay? It's a very different story. And going up, basically, we are stuck with machines which we invented 100 plus years ago. Right? The number one prime mover, that is the machine which moves and just feeds the rest, is the one which Charles R. General Parsons invented in 1884, steam turbo generator. This is the most powerful prime mover in the society because most of our electricity comes from burning fossil fuels. Right? Worldwide, 20% comes from nuclear. Right? But how do we make that electricity once we fission these nuclei? Well, run it through the steam turbo generator. It's the same thing. So the only electricity which is not steam turbo electricity, or coal, or oil, or natural gas, actually some natural gas is now, of course, gas turbines, is the hydroelectricity, right? But bulk of the world electricity is a steam turbo generator. Parsons, 1884. Really. So we haven't invented a bigger, more efficient, more reliable machine than the one we invented in mid-1880s. And if Parsons, this is what I always love about this, really, right? That if you imagine a person from 1820, 1720, 1620, 1520, it's the same stuff. There were no new prime movers. There was a man and a horse. Right? But if you bring people from 1890 to 2011, they would recognize absolutely everything, except you would have to explain them how we got down to that microchip level, really. Right? That's the only thing which would be, but otherwise, internal combustion engine, well, that's Benz and diesel, 1880, 1895, and so on. Right? So this world has been created between 1870 and 1914, with some notable exceptions, right? But basically, yes. So it's very difficult to go up. You see this problem with the things which we are told are the greatest under the sun, the greatest electric cars on the planet. Tesla. Okay, Tesla, right? You read about Tesla. How many batteries are in Tesla? 2,762 or 2,768, I don't know. Don't quote me, but something like that. Isn't that awful, really, right? If you are an engineer and you see that a machine contains 2,760 of something interconnected, you say, that's a bad idea. That's a bad idea, right? Before too long, something will go wrong. If not with one of these 2,000, with the interconnections between them. And they all got to be interconnected. If they are not, it's going to be bad, really. This is not engineering. This is kind of, blind in the darkness, right? Just sticking it together. This is not good. This is why internal combustion engine is good. Why? Well, because I already referred to my Honda. It goes forever, right? It goes very rapidly, right? It's very tight tolerances. You make a 1 millimeter off and it will not go, right? But we mastered that baby after 120 years. We mastered it, and it's so reliable, it's just absolutely incredible, right? Then we get compromise. Okay, pure electrics. Besides, what is you can have your own Tesla. You just put yourself into line and wait, but you have to deposit mere $110,000, right? That's your affordable Tesla, which will save the world, really. Okay, now Volt will save the world. GM will do it on a big scale. The company already bankrupted itself by its engineering stupidity, and which has to be bailed out by $60 billion of US taxpayers' money, right? So, these deliver Volt now. Brilliant. Oh, yes, it will be actually the machine, the altogether old-fashioned internal combustion engine, with the help of the battery, right? Again, when you look at it from the engine point of view, why the hell should I have two prime movers? Is it so clever? Why don't I have just one and be done with it? Okay, to make the long story short, how many Volts, they are on sale since last year, were sold this March? The last year we have, the last month we have the figure for? 47, okay? February was 27 or 37, right? I mean, why should I buy something for $45,000, right? Which is a dubious GM design, has two prime movers, right? And actually, if you would select your trips, right? Don't forget, we have studies. We have studies for everything, right? How many 14-year-olds smoke marijuana in Barnaby? We have studies for absolutely everything. So we have studies for the trips. And you know it very well. Is your trip to nearest 7-Eleven to buy a Slurpee necessary, actually, right? So about 40% of them aren't really. So why the hell should I buy electric car? Just to buy old clunker, buy old Impala Chevy, 20-year-old, and just don't go with it half of the time. And you are in the same spot, really. It's as simple as that, really, right? Okay? So all of these things are basically failures, right? Either these things cost $100,000, right? Or people won't buy them because they still cost $40,000. And Then there is this ultimate vision, this great visionary. All these people who make their money on things, right? This is the guy behind Tesla, right? And there is our Shai Agassi, right? The brilliant man who says, we'll plug it everywhere. He's now selling it to Israelis and to Chinese. Everywhere people will plug in their cars. Everything will be electric. We plug it in. Hey, I have a news for you. 2 years ago, humanity passed a very important milestone. More than 50% of us live in cities. And I don't mean city like this one, okay? I mean cities like what used to be known as Bombay. I refuse to say Mumbai. It's Bombay, okay? And it's Calcutta. It's not Kolkata, right? How about Beijing, okay? How about Taipei? How about the place where I go every year and which I love dearly and hate dearly, Tokyo? Where the people will be plugging, or Hong Kong, which place which I also love dearly, where these 50-story tall skyscrapers where people live, and you reach the hand and the guy from other 50-story almost touches you. Where these people will be plugging on the street, where they have their individual garages to plug in these mega cities of 30, 40 million people. Every Chinese village these days is like 2 million people, right? Chongqing is 40 million people, whatever, right? So where the Shai will be plugging these things, right? And he's on the cover of every magazine. Agassi saving the planet, electric car, plug-in vehicles, right? Why doesn't he go to some of these places and see how easy it will be to plug in? Besides, you tell me how everything is local, right? Remember, the distributed energy, right? It's local. How do these people in these 50-story skyscrapers will install their windmills on the top of their buildings and generate electricity when every room has air conditioning going full tilt in August and July, right? And every room has a hole in the wall because every room has an individual air conditioner, because there is no such thing as central air conditioning in any Asian city, in any Asian building, period, except some official big buildings. But none of these 50-story things rising to the sky, which will house bulk of the humanity. And where people, now my friends in Tokyo, they are dying in anticipation because, TEPCO is 30% of the Jews, really. And so they will be rationing electricity in July. No fun to be on the 20th story in your mansion in Tokyo without air conditioning in July, really, right? Okay. So I would say lower the expectations, right? Now, we don't even get into the meat of it yet. Okay, let's get into some of the meat. We developed these machines like steam engines, internal combustion engines, which is gasoline engine, a diesel engine. We developed them and we honed them to perfection because they're so reliable that it makes you weep. Okay? Think of these things. These ships are like those planes. Just go from whatever, right? Shenzhen to Vancouver, just go, all the time go, right? Just offload. That's why we are inventing fastest possible methods of offloading them, right? Because, 14,000 containers just, and they just go. Reliability is just frightening. Actually, it totally frightens me because with my older Hondas, I kind of, had to do the dipsticks thing and whatever. Now with this one, you don't have to do anything because you wait for the light to appear saying, ready for oil change, right? I've been driving this one for 2.5 years, and it tells me that my oil is in perfect condition. There is no need to change it. This is frightening me, I haven't been inside the garage for 2.5 years with this machine, right? And just goes and goes. When we came to Canada from US, the first product we bought was a famous GM product in 1972. We were stupid and young, right? So we bought GM car, right? The world brand, right? That car, I bought a battery warmer. I had a little coat around the battery. I plug it in. I was constantly in the garage. I came to the university. We have the plugs at the university. Plug it at the university. It would never start anyway, right? Okay. This Honda, this little Civic Honda, mind you, we are the only people I know of, as we have aged, we've downgraded because we used to have Honda Accord. But my new Honda Civic is longer, wider, heavier, and has a bigger engine than my 1982 Honda Accord, right? So being a rational person, of course, I downgraded. Why my friends all are driving 6-cylinder Camrys, right? Whatever, right? Going to Safeway with 6-cylinder Camry. I don't see the point. Or with Escalade SUV, my favorite vehicle. You can walk past it for about 10 minutes, right? Escalade, right? Amazing. Always one driver. And it's always she, because it's a second family car. He is toiling with little Volvo somewhere, right? And she has the Escalade to go to Slurpee place, right? Anyway. The reliability of these things is truly frightening, and it's at will. We can plug them, unplug them, start them, that's it. The stuff out there is not at will, as you know, right? It happens. And it happens in such a way that we cannot even forecast it. Right? I had a beautiful debate with people a couple of days ago at this NSERC meeting about forecast, but this is an audience which knows very well how tremendously our weather forecasts have improved with all these satellites over the past 20 years, especially the ones over like next week or 2 weeks, right? I love to read these things now. Oh, we can now forecast wind reliably for the next 2 months. Yeah, right. Give me a break. Next time when you look out, how many days do I look out and they say, you know, in Winnipeg it will be totally overcast. There is not a cloud in the sky. They cannot even read them. They cannot even look out of the window the same morning they are reading that Environment Canada forecast issued at 4 a.m. really, right? Okay. No, truth be told, our one-day forecasts have improved tremendously over the past 20 years. Our 5-day forecast, nothing at all. Mind you, Environment Canada issues, if you have noticed, 1-year forecasts, right? Do you know it? They issue a 1-year forecast. 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and 12-month forecast. Seasonal forecast, right? So I checked it last week, right? Our August in Winnipeg will be above average precipitation and above average temperature, right? Okay. Then, and this is now doing this self-punishing trick, eventually then in August, they will publish a map showing, you know, to what extent this matches their forecast, right? Usually the reliability is less than 5%, right, for the whole country, right? So anyway, the problem actually is not so much that we cannot forecast how much it will blow or shine 1 week from now. The problem is that we, you know, even if you would have a perfect forecast, still we know that it would not work a large part of the time. Okay? So people always say, once we get better forecasts, we get a better handle on it. Not quite. Even if I get a perfect forecast, I know very well that there will be many days when wind will not blow and sun will not shine with the desirable intensity, whatever it is. You know, my 1,000 watts per square meter will not be there. Why it is such a trouble? Well, because we've developed this society based on fossil fuel, which could be started and stopped at will, which needs them all the time. In electricity, we have a very rigorous approach to it. With car is obvious. If it's in your garage, you start, you go. With electricity, when you have to manage, so you manage yourself and your car. But with electricity, you have to manage the supply for millions of people, not for one city, for the whole country or for the bunch of countries. In Europe, it's integrated. In Europe, you can sell, and we do sell, juice from Ukraine to Portugal. Not quite all the way, but you know, it's all interconnected, from Norway to Sicily, really. We are not interconnected at all. We are in Middle Ages in North America. There are practically no interconnection. In Canada, there is not a single east-west line, not a single one, right? There is no connection between Manitoba and Ontario, between Manitoba and Saskatchewan, okay? And so on, right? There is no connection between Ontario and Quebec. Quebec, the biggest hydroelectric producer on this planet, they sell everything south, right? They sell nothing to their neighbors, right? And even better, Newfoundland, which is the largest undeveloped hydro capacity in Labrador, cannot develop it because if they will bring it to Ontario, which needs it badly, it will have to go over Quebec. And Quebec would do what? Buy it from Ontario for a penny and sell it to, buy it from Newfoundland for a penny and sell it to Ontario for $10, right? This is in one country. So much for we being a country, right? I mean, it's disgraceful, right? The point is this. In electricity load, we talk about, you know, base load. Base load, which is always there. It's always there. It never sleeps, right? And then there are the peak loads, right? People wake up, right, and start brushing their teeth and brewing their coffee. Also, they don't do it anymore. They line up with their running cars in front of Starbucks, right, instead of brewing it at home. So it's another great use of, you know, Starbucks probably contributed to something like extra 3 or 4% gasoline consumption in North America, right? Because anytime I go past these things, there's like 400 cars waiting, snaking out down the road and everything, instead of doing it in the luxury of their home, right? You know, anyway. there used to be load factor, base load factor, right? Because what was during the night? Okay, there are some emergency light. There are street lights in the streets, right? So people will be mugging and raping in the streets. So, okay? But there used to be well-defined base load factor, which was pretty low actually, right? Then people wake up and start, lighting and shining and moving, and the factories, spindles up, and they are knitting and knotting and smelting and whatever. And then they come home really, and it goes up again because they cook the dinners, and then it goes down, right? They watch some telly by 10 o'clock, whatever they switch. It used to be like that, When you were a manager of load for a big load system, well, it was great, My base load is this, and my peak is whatever, 7 to 10 a.m., right? Then it goes a little bit down, and it goes a little bit, then it goes in the evening, and it goes down, whatever. Now, what are we having? Well, you know very well what we are having because you have created it, right? At least my students tell me, what do I do at 2 a.m.? Well, that's the best time to cruise that porn at 2 a.m., really, right? Or to watch these weird movies at 2 a.m., right? Now, don't laugh. This is look, this is how it is. 70% of internet use is cruising porn, right? That's the simple fact, right? We know it. We know use of internet. We know this everything. There are zillions of people who are studying this to the last interconnection, right? What all these servers and what all this e-stuff is already consuming in terms of electricity in North America? It's already 11%. It's already 11%. Imagine that, right? And it started. Okay, so you say it started with Netscape, right, in 1994, but it really didn't. It really burst maybe like 12 years ago. So in 12 years ago, we ran it from 0 to 11% of North American electricity. Can you imagine 20 years from now, really, right? So maybe quarter of our load, which is a load which doesn't have any base load or peak load. It's there unpredictably all the time, really. People cruise during the day, during the night, whatever, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. That's not the only thing, right? Average family in North America has 3 televisions, of which one is left constantly on, just in case you would nip in your den or bedroom or bathroom, whatever, right? Okay. That's not it either. I am here now, right? But already I told you, my HRV is running.
So why is it running?
Sorry?
Why is it running? Why didn't you turn it off when you leave?
Because my wife is at home.
She's half as smelly as you are.
That is, my wife is not at home. She's in her office seeing her patients during the day. But when she comes home, I want her to have fresh air in the house, right? Okay. Now, okay, fine. Suppose I switch my air conditioner. I don't have an air conditioner. Suppose I might switch my HRV. Okay. What else is running in my house? What is running in about 90% of houses in North America? Of course, I have a security system. And that's always on. Always on, right? Your television is always on. Anything which is on remote, your garage is always on, right? The biggest load in North America, what we call the dead loads or phantom loads or loads which you don't see really, are security system, garage openers, televisions, and anything electronic like that, microwave ovens, whatever, stereo system. There is any number of these things which are like that, right? You add up all these babies. It's 350 million people, right? In 120 million households, right? You add up and what? A country of the size of Vietnam, 100 million people. That consumes more electricity than Vietnam right now, okay? And that's running all the time, right? So what is happening is 2 things. The load factor is increasing. The base load was like this. Now it's getting fatter and fatter, right? And the peaks are getting ever more unpredictable. Why? Because of the machine which I don't have, as I said a while ago, because of air conditioning, right? Air conditioning is now sweeping the planet. Right? It used to be really, not necessarily hot, but first in hot and humid places like Alabama, Georgia, right? Then it moved into hot and dry places, and now it's moving everywhere. When we built this house, which I designed 20 years ago, of course I didn't put air conditioning. By the way, I would. In Winnipeg, you would need maybe like 2 weeks a summer, maybe 3 days a summer. That's it, right? Then people were building all these houses around us. All of them built shoddily, all of them improperly, but all of them with massive air conditioners, right? If that would be the case, it wouldn't be so bad. What's really bad, the way people use these air conditioners. Listen to this carefully. And there's been studied to death. People now require, in summer, the indoor temperature which would trigger the heating in winter. And that is our problem, right? So in summer, they must have 25 Celsius inside, sorry, in winter, but in summer, they insist on 17 or 18 inside. So whenever I go out in the morning, right, it's 17, 18 Celsius, and my neighbor's air conditioner going full tilt, right? It's there, it's available, it's relatively cheap. Now, these are central air conditioners, right? And again, like with these big furnaces, we hone them not to perfection, but quite a bit. They are really efficient, right? These window units are not so efficient, and you install them as the money comes. Make more holes and install more of them. This is now a killer everywhere in Asia. You can see the whole buildings in Asia, right? And you can see that every room, basically, in some of these rich neighborhoods, every room has an air conditioner, right? So if there is a 50 stories, right, and one face of facade is whatever, 6 windows per floor, so that's it. You start multiplying these things, right? And this is, of course, making things very unpredictable, right? Because some days are more tolerable, so not everybody will switch on. Some days are so that everybody will switch on and put the knob to the max, really, right? So to manage the loads now in big cities, in hot countries, is just mind-boggling, right? So what do you need is a storage. There is my diesel fuel tank, really, and I can crank up all of these diesel engines, right? There is my big coal pile, and I can just put another generator because coal stations are usually like what? 4 times 200 megawatts, 5 times 300 megawatts. I can always up it like that, right? I cannot up it with wind. I cannot up it with solar. And what the hell you do with that solar during the night, right? In these cities where most of that air conditioning in houses is during the night because people work in air-conditioned environment, but they want to have some half-decent sleep, really, right? Right? Sorry?
We can do it.
We can do it with solar.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Solar air conditioning.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. In a 50-story houses, okay, right?
No.
That's where the most humanity will be living, right?
50 stories. We can do it up to 8 stories.
Okay, but that's not, go to Hong Kong, okay? Go to Beijing if it's 8 stories, these houses, right? Show me an 8-story apartment house in Hong Kong and I'll give you a penny. Okay?
A penny?
Yeah.
A penny for each one?
For 8-story apartment house in Hong Kong.
But what I'm saying, do I get a penny for each one that I show you or one for any 8-story building that I
Just one. Just make it an example. Come on, you know better. You know better. What is it? Well, come on. The average, I would guess, this is easy, we can find out easy. I think the average number of stories in Hong Kong is about 32, I would think. Okay, that would be decent average, I think, right? Okay, let's switch into something else which is important here. Forget about poor people who are in the hot climate and have to air condition, right? We don't have to air condition, basically, okay? In Ontario, yes, whatever, but, okay. So, I happen to live in the windiest place in the North America, right? You look at the map and you see the windiest place in U.S. is North Dakota, windiest place in Canada. It's the Great Prairies, right? Just all the way from Manitoba to Texas, right? So we are just about the windiest place, right? Of course, we still have 2 gigawatts on Nelson River, so we don't need that wind. We have lots of hydroelectricity. We don't know what to do with it. We sell it to Americans, so on, so on. But, anyway, in their eternal wisdoms, Manitoba Hydro, to be politically correct, decided to start putting some wind in place, right? I couldn't resist that thing when I was writing my latest paper for American Scientist this January, which came out just in May. As I was writing it, I was looking, we got lots of snow. This is beautiful, So I'm looking there, and I'm writing it one day, and next day, and the same thing out there, because the same thing out there is always there in winter. That's what we call Canadian high. That's why it's so beautifully blue, and everything is so skiing, even it's minus 20, because there is no wind for 3 weeks. 2 weeks, then for 3 days there is a wind, and more 3 weeks there is no wind. So what the hell are you doing like that in a situation like that when you need that juice most? Because in Manitoba, many people don't have these furnaces I have. Many people don't have any furnaces because electricity was cheap from hydro, so they are heating with hydroelectricity. Now you say, oh, hydroelectricity, this is bad because it's flooding. This is politically incorrect. It's flooding the land, displacing the First Nations from their land. It's a horrible thing. We cannot have hydroelectricity, right, And the dams are big concrete, are unsightly, whatever. We have to have something like, what the hell are you doing in Winnipeg in January with wind turbine or North Dakota or whatever, really? Okay? Now, in Asia, typhoon, in Putonghua, typhoon, right? And when they come, what do you do with these big machines? This is one of the mystery of these wind turbines. When the wind really blows, We have to shut them down. Because otherwise, that's like kindergarten engineering. It's a huge tower and a huge blades on the top of a huge tower. So in the big wind, they all topple down, right? So in the typhoon season, and they come and go. Typhoon number 1, typhoon number, in Japan we number them. In Taiwan and Hong Kong, they give them these poetic names. Alva is coming, and then whatever is coming and coming and coming. Some season like 16 of them, whatever. So how, and that's when people needed air conditioning, it's hot and humid. So how do you keep these babies turning? You have to shut them down, really, right? How about in Quebec? So, in Manitoba, not so good. In Hong Kong, not so good. How about in Quebec? Quebecs are very, very green, right? Very French, very green, right? Remember, those of you of certain age, that occasionally a strange meteorological situation happens when the warm air and cold air collide and stay, and they deposit a layer of 20 centimeters of ice on everything in sight, right? Not good for your wind blades, not so good. Besides, how do we make those wind blades? What are they? Nothing but distilled crude oil or natural gas, right? How do we make those towers? Nothing but our old friend steel, really, right? Okay. How do we make those photovoltaic cells? Oh, wow, smelting that silicon, because it needs to be smelted and purified. Oh, wow, this is very energy-intensive process. And so it goes down. How do we mount these cells? I love always, friend of mine, photovoltaic people always do one thing, showing you how the exponential decline of this installed cost. Please. That's not an install cost. That's the cost of making that stupid cell. You have to make that cell into a certain field. You have to encase that field firmly into some structure. That structure must go into a bigger structure, and you have to mount it on the roof, on the ground, and screw it to the ground and install it in lots of steel, right? Now, if the cost would be going down as it is, the installation cost next year would have to be 0, okay? Which is impossible, right? Okay? So, and when you check solar bus, oh, the beauty of the web, really, 2 a.m., you can check solar bus and you see that the install cost actually of these things over the past 10 years hasn't done this at all. It has done barely that. It's gone down, but barely. It hasn't done anything like that, really. Okay? We could go on in this vein for a long time. The sources are obvious. They are intermittent, they are unpredictable, and they don't scale up easily. We need the juice on P scale, 10 to 15 at least, to make for the countries and cities. Globally, we need to replace something which is 10 to 20 exajoules, right? And this is just not easily done by these things. Now, I'm not saying it should be done. I'm not saying it's undesirable. It's very desirable. It should be done, but lower your expectations. The story of energy transitions, and we've gone through many energy transitions, right? If you are interested, I had a whole book about it last year, just simply called Energy Transition. Very straightforward, very simple, very primitive book, just simply boom, 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 laying it out. Long story. Let me give you my favorite example. In 1850s, Joule, the guy after him called Joule, and Thomson, the guy who later became known as Lord Kelvin, they discovered the nozzle effect. When you compress air and push it through nozzle, it cools, expands, cools. Brilliant idea. Takes another 40 years before Linde. You can still see little trucks running around with compressor. That's the Linde company. Then he made a patent out of it, actually started to liquefy air and separating nitrogen and oxygen, whatever. Right? Then by 1914, somebody patented actually, how to liquefy natural gas and put it on a ship. But nobody ever did it, actually. Until in late 50s, we started to run some experimental little liquefied natural gas tankers. By 1964, Brits were shutting down their old coal mines. They didn't discover North Sea yet, so they said, we'll start importing liquefied natural gas from RSF, from Algeria. They put tremendous amount of money into it. As soon as they did it, they discovered North Sea, right? Abandoned the thing, really. So the only people who stuck to LNG were Japanese, bringing it from Alaska, right? Through the 70s, 80s, really, right? Then finally, in the 90s, people get into bigger ships, but not so big yet. Finally, in the past decade, people really got into big ships. And the liquefied natural gas, the price of liquefaction went down, price of the big tankers went down. So people said, finally, it will be like oil. You can take that gas from anywhere and ship it anywhere, right? Then comes the shale gas in North America, right? And Americans were building many of these terminals to bring that LNG to Texas and Louisiana. Now they don't need them, really. So you see, 160 years after we discovered the principle how to liquefy natural gas, right? We finally got a worldwide industry going, which collapses in the next 5 years after it got going, basically, right? So there are many dangers, right? This old English, many a slip betwixt the cup and the lip, really, right? And even after 160 degrees perfect, and whatever. So please, anytime you see any forecast, EU by year 2030, 100% wind electricity. British Columbia by 2025, 100% wood chip electricity. Please don't even look at those forecasts. Just use them for recycled paper, our great export to China, right? Bundled recycled paper to China, right? Or whatever, shred them and use them to enhance the insulation in your ceiling or something like that, right? Don't even look at those forecasts. They are truly, literally not worth the paper they are printed on, right? So yes, the green futures are desirable, but no, they are not coming to your neighborhood tomorrow. I will close with this pregnant sentence.
Does anyone dare to ask a question?
Honey will attack me. He will attack me straight.
Oh, no, cut.
I think that it's a lovely speech, but I'd love to debate you on a lot of it. The conclusion. I believe on the scale side, right? It's a hard transition.
10 to 20.
Yeah. Really hard.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff we can't do. Like the lights industry. Right?
Oh, that's disco.
Yeah.
That's awful. That's awful.
We can do 20 times better than this. Right? Homes. We can't do better.
The stationary stuff is okay. Transportation stuff is much more difficult.
Actually, that's the one I want to talk to you about. And the intermittency of the renewables. Right? So the stuff David is doing. Actually,
think about these diesel container
exactly
ships.
that. Exactly that. We've got this problem of an intermittent energy resource called wind, which is often in remote locations and not really accessible. The transmission lines are actually the biggest problem.
I didn't even talk about that.
We didn't even talk about that, right? But one of the things we can do is to combine wind and store it as an artificial carbonaceous fuel with carbon capture. So in one step, we get the renewables fuel and we get the carbonaceous fuel that's high energy density. You can get 42 megajoules a kilogram. You can store it at the site. You come and collect it once in a while. And now, scaling that up is going to be difficult, but the cost is only 3 times where we are now. Is 3 times too high, is my question.
See, I should have talked about transmission, of course. That's a key to it. But what I would say is, that's another kind of a general statement or generic statement. I would advise anybody not to look at any cost estimates for a simple reason. And this is a pet peeve of mine for decades. We don't know what anything costs, and I'm very serious about this, right? Okay. See, so how can you compare wind with coal when we don't know that coal price 6 cents per kilowatt hour? What the hell is that? How do I know it's 6 cents? Because it doesn't account for half of the stuff it should account for. Okay, right? So you always see these estimates, that it will become competitive by date certain. I have no idea if it will become competitive because I don't trust even the baseline price for the coal or whatever it is, right? Because let's put it away. People know that all food is subsidized. I hope you are aware in Canada, everything you ever eat is subsidized, right? Okay? EU, 40% of EU budget goes for agricultural subsidies, right? And people think this energy is different because it's not subsidized that overt way. It's subsidized covertly in zillions of ways. Your stupid ethanol gasoline in North America here costs us $20 billion a year through agricultural subsidies, right? $20 billion a year, right? So and the same with tax cuts for, let's not talk about $100 billion which you dump into nuclear electricity since 1948, right? So what is the price of electricity or energy in general, right? And OPEC, of course, is what? That's an extortionately price by a bunch of Middle Eastern countries, right?
Guilty as charged.
Right? Yeah. So you see, this is my generic problem, right? That whenever you say anything about the cost, right? I want to shut up and don't listen to what the cost is really, right? Because I don't know what is the cost even of the things which you've been selling for decades, like coal or oil or gasoline.
He actually turns out.
Allow me to ask other people too.
Of course.
Then maybe we can continue the last one.
Well, I'm just curious about one thing. It's not very important, but you see container ships. Right. They clearly won't pass through any canals or locks. Right.
No, you see, because people don't care. Up to 11,000 you can. They go through Suez. There's no problem. But these, these big ones, they don't care. They just go from China to West Coast. You don't have to pass through anything, really. Okay? And the big ones, they are so big that you just can go around the Cape in South Africa and go to Europe. So this is not much of a problem. Like these tankers, basically, these ships have eliminated distance. The cost of going from Yokohama around the Cape of Good Hope to Europe and cost of going through Suez is about 4% difference. You don't care. You don't care. You don't care. The stuff is so cheap, and with these LNG tankers, you would lose by natural boil-off anyway. So use that natural boil-off to have a dual fuel engine, diesel and boil-off liquefied natural gas. They almost cost nothing, these things. Distance has been limited. This is why if you discover oil in Antarctica, you can take it to Shanghai. You don't care. If you discover oil wherever, the distance has been eliminated as far as both now oil and natural gas is concerned. Yeah? And these big ships, they just... 70% of this traffic, the growth in the traffic, because, Europeans are a little bit more sane, really, right? They still produce, Germans still make most of their bedrooms, right? And French, they still make most of their socks. They're not like here when we buy everything from China, right? And Italians make their own toothpicks, right? Not like in Canada, so that's...
Yes, but
you described the challenges of the energy transition. So what do you think about some people's proposal to clean up our use of some fossil fuels by whether we're talking about air pollution, so from coal combustion, or carbon sequestration?
I don't want to say anything about it. I think carbon sequestration, to my mind, is... How shall I put it to be polite? So you see my problem is that, right? I think carbon sequestration is just one step short of madness. Okay, just one step short of madness. Look, it's again a scale problem, right? We puff up more than 30 billion tons of that stuff into the air every year. 30 billion tons, okay? About 40% of it is mobile. How do you capture these things from these ships in the ocean and your little car, whatever? 60% stationary. But of it, less than half is a big stationary. They're not going to capture these 3% from my non-existing chimney, really, right? Okay, so, but still then, we are down to billions and billions of tons, right? And I developed this, again, primitive example to show the scale challenge that even if you would just capture, right? Half of that, whatever, then you would have to create industry of the same scale in total volume as is a crude oil industry of the world. Except that one takes 5 billion tons this way and sells the product for $100 a barrel. That one would have to shove the same amount, which is much harder because you've got to compress the bloody thing, really, right? Instead of just flooding water or just, we do flooding mostly, it just doesn't flow, okay? You have to shove it there, right? Make sure it'll stay there, really, right? And you have to find somebody to pay for it, right? Because it's not getting you revenue of $100 per barrel, really, right? Okay, so how fast you can create, and then you would control, about 15% of the global emissions, which would get you nowhere, which gets you to your 450 anytime, Wednesday instead of Tuesday, really, right? That's the difference. Really. So I don't want to talk about carbon sequestration. I might as well talk about, immaculate conception and being reborn as a rabbit in Agra, right? It's just the same thing, really, right? So.
Mike, I think it's your turn.
An implicit message in your talk, you didn't say it at all, is that at least in the intermediate term, maybe for even the longer term, the solution is not technical energy transition, it's social behavior modification. Absolutely. Because how do you achieve that?
You achieve it by forcing people to face the reality, and people haven't faced the reality. And it's very simple. We have to get, everything has to get much worse. And then, because mine is an extremely optimistic message. We have such a room to move. We are so stupid that we are behaving so badly that we have a great room. Imagine that. This is a simple exercise, especially with people of certain age in this room. There's lots of these young kids here, but people of certain age. Imagine we would be like we were in mid-60s. Was life unbearable in 64 or 65, really, right? And imagine in the mid-60s, our electricity energy consumption was nearly half what it is today, 40% less than it is today, right? People forget, wow, okay, between men of certain age. Did people have triple garages in 64? Did they have SUVs? Were they flying to Las Vegas to gamble with money they don't have, right? Okay. Were they going to wedding trips to Mauritius, really, right? Were they going to skiing trips to Italy, right? Were they buying, these Winnebagos or whatever, right? You see, all these things happened since 1960s, right? If we would have, imagine you would have stuck in this continent to passenger cars only. No SUVs, no vans, and no pickup trucks, really, right? As a result of this, most of the vehicles on the road are not cars, are these other things, 55%. And as a result, the North American fleet now averages 22 miles per gallon. 22 miles per gallon. A new car was conformed to CAFE, 27.5 miles, right? But most cars on the road are not cars. They are these other things. So we are 22 miles per gallon, which is no better than European cars in the 1930s. It's just absolutely shameful what we have, really, right? Imagine if we wouldn't have stopped CAFE, 76 to 1985. Just protract that line. We doubled from 13.5 to 27.5 miles in just 9 years, right? If you protract it, average cars would be exactly where my Honda is now, 48 miles per gallon, really, right? We just behave like idiots. So unless and until we are hit, I pray, my sincere prayer is for massive assassination of all Saudi royal family and oil prices going to $500. That will do the trick, really, right? Because we can have cars which are 50 miles per gallon. There is no technical problem. I drive one every day, right? What the hell, right? We can have furnaces like I have. Now, imagine if everybody has a 97% furnace, right? We can plan our trips, which will cut out 40% of trips. Nobody has to fly to Las Vegas to gamble away with money which they don't have, really, right? You start cutting out these things, and you can see we can return to 1964. No problem, right? No problem. The only thing, we will not have SUVs, triple garages, and flights to Las Vegas. That's all. Right?
I hear you correctly. You're saying the solution is crisis management. Let the crisis happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's the only way when we act, really. Unless the crisis happens, we won't act, really. That's just the thing. Because do you see people, as I say, why don't you use your personal experiences, right? As I say, I know ex-people. We age together. We are the only people who downgraded our car and supergraded our house, right? Most of our friends bought bigger cars, and they built what? 4,000 square foot houses with circular staircases, where most of the house cannot be inhabited even, really, right? Okay? So, it requires something like what? Total collapse, so that house will cost them $5 million. Of course, they will not build it at that level, right? Yes, it has to collapse, and then we'll act. We will never act voluntarily. There's foresight and, some quote-unquote mini-sacrifice. It's not living in 64, it's not a really sacrifice, is it? Okay? Yes, it has to collapse, quote-unquote, whatever the collapse is. Yes. That's a very optimistic, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a bit of a rejoiner. Just last year, there were about 20 million cars put on the roads in China. So what is going to be the role of China? It's going to precipitate that collapse through economic shrinking in the US, putting all...
Oh, my favorite question. Don't start me on China. Basically, China has one role in the world today, to out-American America in consumption. That's the Chinese fervent wish, right? Consume about 10 times more than Americans, and then we'll be number one, really, right? So, yes, absolutely. China is great. China is the Saudi royal family killing in slow motion, really, right? So, yes, it will get us there eventually, absolutely. China already, if you don't know it, is importing 60% of its oil, very much like the US. They have the same boat. I love that. It's speeding the day of reckoning. Oh, yes, absolutely. The riders of apocalypse are well settled up. Oh, yes. And now India is coming next, right? And then imagine Black Africa, which will have like billion people before too long. Oh, great news, yes. And they still have oil, so yeah, more oil, yeah, more Muammars. Oh, absolutely, yes. Yeah. The role of China is such that, let me tell you, if you don't know this, I love that one, Imagine countries like France, Germany, England, these great powers. It takes them 100 years, since Edisonian times, more than 100 years, to build up 50, 60 gigawatts of electric capacity, the whole country, 50 gigawatts. China in 1 year in 2004, and again in 2005, again in 2006. Each year, they built more coal-fired power capacity every year than the total capacity of all these three European superpowers. Huh? What else you want to know? So much for greening of China. Okay, they build these, and all these reports go, China has now China ahead of US. China has the largest number of wind turbines. So Chinese built 3 wind turbines, and 60 gigawatts of coal-fired, and they are greening, right? There is no end of delusionary people, you know. I mean, that's just, there's no shortage of those. Oh, yes, China is the real Trump there, right? Truly green, totally green, right? And the real green is, did you see, of course, we know it. You know, years ago, I spent writing about it and, being called all kinds of names. I was one of the, I'm the only person signed with Chinese on that legal illegal publication in 1987 against building of Three Gorges Dam, right? Many Chinese intellectuals deeply suffered for that, right? I was the only Western who joined the cause, right? Of course, they built it, right? And of course, they are saying now what? Officially. A mistake, a disaster, horrible thing, right? Displaced 1.5 million people, right? When there'll be a next big 9/0 earthquake, right? The dam is right there, where the 3 distant plates. I don't want to go there, right? Anyway, so China is just disaster waiting to happen. Yeah? But meanwhile, it's the greatest, latest model, greatest model. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Have you heard of the slingotron? Do you know that concept? So geostationary solar arrays
and microwave thing, right.
Problem is, how do you get it up?
Glasser 1967, that's a very old concept, yeah.
Slingotron is, it just fires the small satellites, you open the concept fundamentally seems to me to be able to replace the electricity band for a large city. Well,
there is a friend of mine who has a better concept. Why to have it floating? This is expensive. Why not to put it on the moon and beam it from the moon, right? And he has a concept. I love this. Machines come first, and the machines start digging the moon soil, and machines extract out of it aluminum and zinc, and make the machines which will make machines on the moon. And they will lay these things, and they will. I love that really. So if you have nothing else to do on a hot summer day, in the late August evening, really, and you are already under the influence of Shiraz or something, you might read stuff like that, and you might say, "Oh, marvelous!" But otherwise, I wouldn't recommend it as engineering reality. Really, no, I just wouldn't really. Ask people in DARPA how difficult it is to beam something across whatever several hundred kilometers. This death race.
That's who I'm working with. And that's who's modeling all this. The people from DARPA. But anyway, so we can maybe.
Yeah. But this distance between the moon, it's a little bit.
I don't think we have to go to the moon. We just.
It would be cheaper. It would be cheaper to make those machines there, because to loft all that hardware somewhere to the midpoint is just. Right? I wish you were right. I wish I was totally wrong. Because, you see, this is just the thing. I always find this, people always blame me, whatever. I wish we could be clad in flexible photovoltaic clothes and we'll be oozing electricity as we go around. That would be great, really, right? I am too much of a stupid 19th century old-fashioned engineer. I just don't believe in these things, really, right? Because things move very slowly, right? Your car is 1884. Benz and Daimler, right? Your big thing, which is brought from China, is Rudolf Diesel, 1897, right? Your turbo generator is Charles Algernon Parsons, 1884, right? And so it goes down the road, right? And it's true that, gas turbine came only in 1930s, but the first ones were made in 1890s anyway, really, right? So what is the new stuff? What is that stuff we are told we are more inventive than ever in human history? What is that stuff which we invented in the last 30 years, 40 in terms of prime movers and energy generation and conversion? Where is that stuff? Give me an example and I give you penny for every example, okay?
1957, of course, nuclear, you haven't mentioned that.
How do you convert that heat into that electricity? Through steam turbine.
No, but you haven't. I'm interested in your view on it.
Yeah?
You haven't mentioned it.
Oh, nuclear. Oh, of course you can. Right? But it's an established thing. It's easier to reach through that, right? Don't underestimate the power of established things. Many of these things are so bloody inertial that, like internal combustion engine, right? Oh, this is my favorite example. This is the place, after all. How about if I would be lecturing here 11 years ago? And I'll be putting down the local boy, Ballard. Right? I would say, not going to work. You would say, oh, what an idiot that man is, really, right? Because at that time, Ballard went from 0 in 4 years to $200 a share. At one point, it accounted like for half of the capitalization of Toronto Stock Exchange, close to it, really, right? And everybody thought, Everybody from the whole world was flying to Vancouver and drinking the exhaust from Ballard's fuel cell. That was the future of cars. Every single fuel cell car, right? Within another 3 years, it went from $200 to $350 and stayed there forever, ever since then, right? And the company went out of the business of making cells for fuel cars and make cells for home. For these kind of little big things in the warehouses where you don't have an exhaust, right? So that's nice to have a fuel cell there moving the Amazon books or whatever, right? Okay. In the last 11 years, everything was to be the Ballard fuel cell car, then everything was to be a hybrid car, and everything was to be an electric car. Still, 98% of stuff, new stuff which is coming out, is an old-fashioned internal combustion engine. Period. Right? And these are facts. I'm not creating these facts. This is what it is, really, right? Besides, this continent is so primitive, hasn't even graduated to diesel engine, which is inherently so much more efficient than auto engine, but this continent still think that diesels are dirty, which they aren't. In France now, 65% of newly sold cars are diesels, right? In Germany, it's 40% plus are diesels, right? Here you can't even buy a diesel, right? Yeah.
Last question, could I?
Given that you think, and I mean it's very convincing, that we're so locked into existing technologies, and you see opportunities where there are opportunities in certain things like the way we build our houses and certain behavioral things like the way we make choices about the technologies we use and so on. So how do we make that happen? Do you have a vision?
Hit the people with high prices.
So my question is, so you're advocating prices or kind of...
Well, no, it's everything. Come on, it's not that simple. Look, why this province, because of the wood, has 2x6? Why don't we have all 2x6? So somewhere is by fiat. Government comes and says it's so, really, right? Look, government says already 77. I have to have a driver's license. There must be a stop sign on the road, right? You know, I have to stop for the pedestrian crossing. So why not to say I have to drive a 50 miles per gallon car, really, right? It's just one addition to it, right? And why not to have a 2x6 house and why not to have, super insulated wall and whatever? So
how to make that happen? I mean,
well, how these other things? How did he put stop sign? We just simply say it's a city ordinance. There must be a stop sign. So you ask for a permit to build a new house. Permit will not be given unless that house is 2x6 house. That's very that requires only passing local ordinance. That's very simple, actually. Some of these things.
It's very simple, but it's not happening yet. So I'm wondering how you envisage us convincing the governments to make.
Because why the government should do these steps? When that house. Look, what it is that. If people would be rational, right, they wouldn't be building houses where 1/3 of the house cannot be inhabited, right?
People are not rational.
Okay, so you force them to be rational. We have, let's say, U.S. had for a long time the luxury car tax, right? So why not to have a luxury home tax, right? You want to have a curved staircase, pay extra 40% for a curved staircase, right? And other thing have technical fixes. For example, I think that it's a bad idea to outlaw incandescent light bulbs. I think it's a horrible idea, okay? They are terribly inefficient, but, they have a light spectrum like nothing else. Let's face it, okay? Okay? There is nothing better than that, okay? Find me a fluorescent which matches the incandescent in its warmth and pleasantness of, just horrible. Whenever I have this screw-in stupid thing, and all it comes to my room and says, how can you live with that, really? It's a horrible light, really, right? So, but anyway, so I don't like outlawing, but we should outlaw 70% efficient furnaces. If people have money for a 4,000 square foot house, they should have extra $2,000 for a 97% efficient furnace. Shouldn't they, right? Okay? So it's a mixture of, you outlaw things, you force things, but it will not work with everything for everything. For other things, simply, we have to start feeling it. Look, what is energy expense as the total of disposable income in this continent? Or food expense. They both are pitiful. Food, on the average, is 10% or slightly less. For richer people, food is like 6%, really, right? Okay? And for energy, for most of the people, it's pretty much the same. It's a 10% thing, really, right? So what people spend 80% on? Well, on flashy cars and on flying to Las Vegas and things like that, right? So the structure, it has to be restructured on a bigger scale as well, not only by some government regulations, really. People have to pay more for essentials because we subsidize them anyway. We subsidize our energy, and we subsidize our food, and then we pay little, right? It's okay. We pay anyway, right? But this way, instead of paying directly, right?
So it turns out that the drivers of environmental change are people.
Absolutely. And only people.
This is a fitting conclusion to this As you will recognise, Professor Smil has never been accused of being a shrinking violet. Your presentation, sir, has stimulated us, and we have lots to think about. We thank you for making this vigorous presentation. We look forward to seeing you again and reading. How many books do you say next year?
Nobody reads any books. The age of book is dead, you know. Everybody's tweeting. Everybody's tweeting. Like, you know, how do you have 3 cell phones? He goes checking them constantly.